Here, Marian Anderson was denied the right to sing in the famous hall in Washington. She was not a member, and she was denied the right. She did not oppose it. She didn't fight it. These are her words. She said, "They had a right. These are the daughters of the American Revolution. That was their right. They are all members of that club. They are proud of it. Why shouldn't they be proud of it? I simply would like to have sung in that hall." So, what did I sow? I didn't fight it. I didn't argue it. I didn't tell the press. I made no issue. I simply, in my imagination, sang in that hall. I stood on that stage and sang to a full house, an appreciative house. They loved all that I did, and I was invited to sing in that hall. Now you will say, well, Mrs. Roosevelt heard about it, and she then took issue with those who were the members, saying, after all, this is tax-exempt property, and all of this is something that is on the backs of the taxpayer, and I feel that we should occasionally open the doors to some great artist. She might have given them any argument, and she was then the first lady of the land. You will say, now that's why they invited Marian Anderson. I say, it was not. Mrs. Roosevelt had to act as she acted because Marian Anderson acted first, and if one could only see what she did, not what Mrs. Roosevelt did, she was only the means to the end. The cause of the entire thing was one who did not argue, who did not protest, who did nothing, who in her own heart simply imagined that she had done it. And if you do it this way, you don't have to fight in this world. You don't have to argue with anyone in this world. Just do it. I have seen people say, no, it can't be done. I am not going to let this go. Well, all right, it's your privilege. It's yours. If you don't want it, unload it. And then someone who really thought of something far bigger than they could have conceived, imagined it. Then they come, asking the very one to whom they turned and said, no, it can't be done, and we do not wish any part of it. Then they came, and they got far more than in the beginning they were willing to take for it. I know these cases. So, you don't have to argue. You don't have to fight. You simply know what you want, and if you had it, what would it be like? How would you feel if it were true? What would you see in the world mentally if it were true? How would your friends see you if now you were the man or the woman that you want to be? Well then, let them see you. That imaginal act, letting them see you as they would have to see you were it true, is the imaginal act being planted. You are sowing the seed at that very moment. And in due season it must come to pass, for that vision of yours, as told us in Habakkuk, it has its own appointed hour. It ripens, it will flower. If it be long, then wait, for it is sure, and it will not be late. Habakkuk. So you don't have to rush it. Dig it up and see if it's growing. You did it in confidence that God's law never fails. Let the earth bring forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And it was so. Genesis 1:29. And as long as earth endures, seed time and harvest shall not cease. Now, the seed time is when you imagine a state. That's the seed time. That's when you sow. And then, in due season, you're going to reap exactly what you sowed. So do not be deceived. You can't sow the unlovely act and expect something other than the unlovely act to appear in your world. You can't do it. If you want someone in this world to be big in your world, treat him as though he were. Not by flattering him, but in your mind's eye, treat him as though he were big. Think of him as important if you want him to be important. I know, in my own case, my family had really no financial, social, intellectual, or any other background of mention. But my mother did not allow her 10 children to know that. And if any of us did anything that mother, well, she wasn't exactly ashamed of it, but she thought it could be better, and it was something that we really should not have done, she would then say to us, "Have you forgotten that you are a Goddard?" She made the name important. It had no importance whatsoever, but she made it important. So she treated us as though we as a family were important. The result is that she lived long enough to see her family grow into importance in the community, all pulling their weight and being very important in their community. Now, you can start it with any family in this world and treat the family as though they were important. Unfortunately, our parents think they are doing the right thing when they compare us to a neighbor and find us wanting. Why can't you be like so-and-so? Right away, it implies you are not as good as... And so if that's the seed she is planting for the child has to do that. But if you will take any child and then not flatter it, no, but in your mind's eye see it as important and treat it in your mind's eye as though it were, see it successful. I read here, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, the famous men in the theatrical world whose mothers always looked upon them as most important. Clifton Webb was one whose mother, from the time he was a little baby, treated him as most important, and they mentioned about 8 or 10 or 12 of them. Each rose to stardom in the theatrical world because they had mothers who treated them in a different manner. And so the story came out in the magazine I read. I know it's only based upon a single law if the mothers knew it. Well, whether they knew it or not, that's how they acted, and it's simply putting into effect God's law. So when I say, awake, O sleeper, I mean that we are asleep if we are not aware of what we are doing. We are asleep. So awake, O sleeper, and rise from the dead. And the sleep in most of us is so profound, we might just as well be dead. But become aware of the law and become aware of the promise. And the promise is that you are a child of God. As a child of God, you can't grow into anything in eternity other than God. You can't possibly become anything but God if you are a seed of God. So if you believe it, if I believe that I truly am, as the 82nd Psalm tells me that I am, know ye not that ye are God's sons of the Most High, all of you, not a few, no little elect, but all of you. Then he tells us what we must first encounter in order to do it. You now will die like men, you will fall as one man, O princes. Well, if I am a prince, then my father must be a king. And if I am destined to become and take his place, then I must become one day king. King in my own mind's eye, and if he's a father, I must become father. And that's the entire story of the scriptures. While we are here, remember his law, the law of the identical harvest, that you can't fool God, so be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, so shall he reap. And then, because you are going to reap it, do not grow tired, do not grow weary in well-doing. Do it every moment of time, though you do not see the immediate harvest. Do it anyway because you cannot fail to reap that harvest. So do it. Spend a little moment every day and deliberately plant loving thoughts, loving seeds. Bring before your mind's eye those that you know as friends. Represent them to yourself without their knowledge, without their consent, in some lovely manner. When they conform to that in the outer world, you don't need praise. You don't need to tell them, that's what I imagined for you. You know, you have the satisfaction of knowing what you did, therefore they will conform to it, and you will see them, and you will reap it, and you'll have the satisfaction without having them feel obligated. If you tell them what you did, they will feel almost obligated to do something for you in turn. You don't want anything in return. You simply do it because you enjoy the doing. And as you do it, it becomes more and more a habit, and every moment of your conscious life you'll be doing it, instead of wasting your time with all the unlovely and negative things. You ignore that and do it deliberately in the loving things. So, here tonight, when I say, awake, O sleeper, and rise from the dead, I'm appealing to you to become more and more aware of what you are imagining. For as you become more and more aware of what you are imagining, you are awakening. And so you become every moment of time aware, and you refuse then to allow your imagination to entertain the unlovely things in the world, and you simply put it on the lovely, you do it. And that moment that you do it, you plant it, and then you have confidence in God's unbroken law that it must come up, that you may harvest it. In due season it will rise, and in due season you will harvest it. It's a law established in the very first chapter. Read it in the 11th verse. It's stated so clearly and so perfectly that no man can break it. And then it is captured in the last verse of the 8th chapter, that as long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest shall never cease. So seed time, you have it. Every time you imagine anything, that's seed time, and the harvest must follow. It can't precede it. So you have seed time and harvest established forever and forever as long as the earth endures, and you are the one spoken of in 8th chapter. It is to you that the whole thing is addressed, for the whole thing is about you. Now let us go into the silence.